Hey, it is my favorite time of year. It is our first patron contest winner build. Now, if you don't know, twice a year we do a contest over on Patreon where you can win a chance for us to come out to your shop and we build a project together. Last time we went to Germany. This time we thought we'd take it up a notch and go someplace even crazier. Wait for it. Kansas. Now I know what you're thinking, Kansas, but it's not about the place, it's about the people. And this year's winner is awesome. So, here he is. What are you looking up?
How long I've been a member on Patreon? I thought it told me.
Are you a member on Patreon?
I think so. Ooh. Get the stuff out. Hi, my name is Brandon Remy, and I live in Olathe, Kansas. I'm an e-commerce consultant, helping companies grow and solve their problems with technologies. During the pandemic, I was building a lot of Legos with the kids, and after a while, realized that the kids had stepped away, and I was, finding a lot of kind of tranquility and peace building those. So the next step, when I learned about Bourbon Moth and how to make cabinets, it was kind of like Legos, where I got to have something completed at the end of the day. I just had to, make the brick before assembling everything together. Also, I wanted to, show my kids that, you can be productive where, I sat at a computer all day long, but I wanted to actually have something tangible at the end of the day to show them. So I got rid of all the toys from the garage and filled it with toys of my own. And that's kind of, what led to this project.
So with that, let's go to Kansas. Now, all of these patron builds are different. You show up and you just don't know what you're going to expect. I mean, I keep half expecting to be murdered by dogs or breakfast meats. I'm just kidding. Brandon was super nice and welcoming from the moment we showed up. His neighbor made us this nice breakfast. He showed me his pet bird. I mean, we were off to a great start. And then he showed me the space that he wanted to transform, which was this closet right off of their kitchen. Now, it used to look like this. It was a pantry space, but he cleared it all out before we showed up, and now it looks like this. His idea is to turn this into somewhat of a butler pantry with lower cabinets, stone countertops, and upper cabinets with floating shelves. I know, that's a lot to get done in a week. And to make it even more stressful, Brandon told me that the people who are doing the stone were showing up tomorrow, as in the next day, to template for countertops. So we quickly showed the design to his wife to get approval, and that's when it turned into this color. She liked the design, she just wanted it blue. It's not my house, so I was all for it. And then Brandon showed me his shop.
So I made it to be able to park in it, and then we had a pretty bad winter this year. We didn't park in it once.
Dude, this thing's
So
huge.
I just decided to go all out. Yep.
Look at this nice miter station.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a big TV. So you just kind of like watch TV while you work?
Building these for my father-in-law, and they were just kind of stacked up. So it kind of made a little island, although he's about the height of Danny DeVito, so I think I might have built it a little too tall for him. The Michael Alm whiskey cabinet.
Oh, no way.
So
You've got secret whiskey storage
There you go.
built into your bench?
yep.
Oh, this isn't even open.
Nope, not yet.
What else you got in there?
Two little
Some
picks
larceny,
for-
Elijah Craig.
and then
Ooh,
some wine.
You know,
Well,
for the ladies.
when it gets dark.
Now, I would have loved to take a very thorough tour of his entire shop, but we didn't have time for that. We had to get building because the cabinets needed to go in by the end of the day. So I quickly made a cut list for my SketchUp model, and with that, it was time to start ripping down some plywood. After I helped him clean off his table saw. I mean, you would think if you knew somebody was coming over to do a build, you'd clean off your table saw before I got there. That's all I'm saying. But that didn't take long, and we started ripping down sheets of plywood. Now, Brandon was very nice in that he already had all the supplies we needed for the cabinets on hand when I got there. To build all the cabinet boxes, we're using UV-coated birch plywood so that we don't have to finish the inside of the boxes after ripping all the sheets down to the correct width. We were gonna rip them to the correct length, doing some cross cuts, but Danny DeVito's work furniture was in the way, so we had to move that to the side, and then we started doing cross cuts to cut all of our cabinet pieces to their final size. Pretty soon, the pieces were stacking up. All of our boxes were slightly different sizes, so as we cut down each piece, Brandon labeled every part very carefully so we would make sure to get all of them back in the correct order. Once we had all the normal pieces cut, it was time to cut these weird L-shaped pieces, which are going to be our corner cabinet unit. Now, Brandon and his wife decided they wanted to leave this as open shelving, which means you're going to see the inside of the cabinet. So instead of using that UV-coated birch plywood that we used for everything else, we decided to use something a little nicer, and that was 3/4 inch rift-sawn white oak veneered plywood. Except for that big piece you see there, that's going to be on the top and you're not going to see it, so we snuck another piece of that birch plywood in there. Basically, we just have to cut out a little square in the corner, that will be our opening, and then this entire box will go into the corner. So we started out by cutting most of the piece out with the track saw, and then finished it with that nice DeWalt up and down saw. The up and down saw left a little something to be desired, so I cleaned it up real quick with the Bourbon blade, and then with all of our cabinet box pieces cut, it was time to start hooking them together. Now, speed was the name of the game for this project, so we just tacked all the boxes together with a pin nailer and then drove in some screws from the outside, because you're not going to see the outside of any of these cabinet boxes. It didn't take long for Brandon to delegate his tasks to his son, Landon. I thought we were here to work, and Brandon apparently is here to enforce child labor laws. Anyways, we got all of our square boxes together, then we started hooking together this L box the same way, tacking it with a 16 gauge brad nailer. This one's going to have a fixed middle shelf, so I marked out where that shelf goes, and we tacked and screwed that in place as well. And then we started measuring for our back panels. Now, we cut down the back panel for that L-shaped cabinet, again out of some rift-sawn white oak ply, because you're going to see inside that cabinet. And I was just about to hook it onto the cabinet box when I realized, hey, wait a second, this is unfinished ply. We should probably finish this before we hook the whole thing together. So we called Brandon's wife out to the garage to pick out a sample from the 3 different color Rubios we brought with us. Her favorite was Rubio Mist. And then we set Brandon to sanding all of the oak pieces to get them ready for finish, while Craig and I cut all the back panels for our square cabinet boxes. Kind of like this. All of our back panels are cut out of 1/2 inch UV coated birch plywood, and the nice thing with these back panels is not only do they add a lot of strength to the cabinet box itself, but they also ensure that the box is nice and square. So after tacking it in place, I went around and drilled some pilot holes, and Craig followed closely behind and added some screws. Just like that, we had one cabinet box completely built. Now like 20 more to go. By the time we were done adding the back panels to all the boxes, Brandon had so nicely sanded the inside of that oak box, and it was time to mix up some of that Rubio Monocoat mist and get everything coated and finished. There were a few of the other boxes that we used the oak plywood on the side, because you're actually going to see the inside of those boxes as well. That'll make more sense when we're installing the drawers, but anyways, so we smeared Rubio in all the appropriate places. At one point, I thought it was smart to let Brandon and Craig just handle the finish while I sat down and had a nice hot cup of coffee, because I thought I'd been doing too much work, and, you know, it was selfish of me to do everything. Pretty soon we had all of our cabinet boxes hooked together, and it was time to start working on our toe kick. I also found some safety glasses, which was nice because up until this point I was using my safety squints, and I was not happy about it. To build our toe kick, we just used all of these scrap pieces that we ripped off of our birch plywood. we had Landon cut all the pieces down to the right size, and then I very carefully stacked them up. Then I gave a quick tutorial on how to hook the toe kick together, which again we just did with a brad nailer and some screws. Once I thought Brandon had that under control, I set my sights on the higher priority, which was riding his other son Logan's electric scooter up and down the street while he chased me. I mean, all work and no play makes, well, it makes for a less interesting video. Then the last step we had to do before installing our cabinet boxes was use the lamello to carve out some mortises on the front of all of our cabinet boxes. You see, we have to get these boxes in today, which means we're not going to have time to do the face frame. So we added those lamello mortises so that we can snap our face frame in place later on. Brandon thought the lamello was a little loud, so he inserted his brand new IsoTunes 2.0s, while I drew a picture of a duck on the back side of his cabinet. Don't worry, you're never going to see it again. Then it was time for a quick break while I showed the youngsters the proper way to play a little European football. See, that's my classic move. You shoot wide, pass to the right, and score. Kids never saw it coming. Then we had a nice dinner of traditional Kansas barbecue. Actually, I don't know if beef ribs are traditional Kansas barbecue, but I'm going with it. All I know is they were flippin' delicious. And then after dinner, we were finally ready to get our cabinet boxes installed. It's hard to believe that this is still day one, but so far we have got a crazy amount of work done. Brandon started off by cutting our trim to the right size to fit our toe kick. Then I pried off the pieces, handed them to his worker bees, who carried them out to the shop for disposal. Pretty soon we had all of the trim removed and we started bringing in our toe kicks and setting them in place. Now I fully expected to put these toe kicks in and then have to shim them to get them level. But that's when I realized we're in Kansas. Everybody always tells me how flat Kansas is, and they weren't lying. I mean, the toe kicks were perfectly level first try. Man, cabinet makers in Kansas have it so easy. See what I'm talking about? Flat. So happy with the positioning of our toe kicks, we added some screws to secure them in place, kind of like this. Little zip, little zap, little Kansas City zoop, and we started hauling in our cabinet boxes. And we started with this giant corner unit because it was the biggest and most awkward, and we thought we might as well just get that out of the way for starters. I was a little nervous putting these boxes in place because if I got the measurements wrong, we really didn't have time to remake anything. So once the first two boxes went in, I was feeling pretty confident. Then we got the third box in place. So far, everything's looking good. Then we brought the fourth box in, and it was down to that final box. And wouldn't you know it, it fit perfect. I thought with the buildup, maybe I could trick you guys into thinking that it wasn't going to fit, but nope. Everything fit exactly as we had planned, which is good. And with that, it was on to day two. Day two started bright and early with the stone countertop folks showing up to template those boxes we installed the night before. I don't know how they did it, something with a laser and bazookas and all sorts of newfangled tools. They left assuring us they'd be back Wednesday morning with finished countertops. So, knowing what had to be done before that happened, we set to work on our face frames. We cut down some poplar, because that's the wood we decided to go with for all the face frames and cabinet doors, and then we had to get it all milled up. Now, Brandon's shop is very well equipped for all things woodworking. He's got all the tools you would need. They're just not all accessible at the same time, so you kind of have to pull things out as you need them. But that's totally fine. If it works, it works. Pretty soon we had a bunch of poplar milled up for our face frame pieces, and we started ripping it to the right size. Now the really nice thing about the lamello is that we can just clip these pieces on as we get them cut make sure everything fits, and then unclip them to hook the whole face frame together. So that's exactly what we did. We started with the first piece, added some lamellos and clip. Then we started with the second piece, more lamellos and clippity clip clap. I promise I'm not going to say clippity clap on every single piece. Clip, clap. All right, that's it. And this piece Brandon's doing, so it doesn't really count when I say clippity clap because it was somebody else. And that one, clip clap, clip, clap. I mean, it's just so satisfying. You'd say it too if you were in my position. The point I'm trying to make is the Lamello made things easy. No, I'm not sponsored by them, but after this project, I am a huge fan. I'm not exaggerating when I say in less than 20 minutes, we had all of the pieces cut for our face frame and clipped on exactly where we wanted them. And all of them fit perfectly because we could cut each piece individually as we went, test fit it, add the lamellos, and clip it in place. So once we were satisfied with how everything fit, we just pulled them all back off of there. Well, actually, first I marked very carefully where all those pieces landed so that we could make sure to hook them together, and then I pulled them off. Clap, clip. Clappity, clip, clip. See, that's the reverse of clippity clap. So when you pull things off, that's the appropriate sound effect. We hauled all the pieces back out to Brandon's shop. I marked where we needed pocket holes to hook them all together. Then I handed them off to Brandon. He pulled out the pocket hole jig and zip-zap zooped the crud out of those pieces. And then all we had to do was screw them together. We already knew everything was going to fit, so after we got the entire face frame with some added little segments for drawers, we didn't even do another test fit. I was pretty confident we would be in the clear. And the really nice thing is that now that our face frame... What the heck are you doing? Anyways, now that our face frame is done, we can take all the measurements off of the face frame for our cabinet doors and drawer faces. So I did just that, created a list of all the pieces we needed, and we started ripping down more poplar to make all of our cabinet doors. Now all the cabinet doors are going to be shaker style with a floating panel in the middle. All of our drawer faces are going to be just solid pieces of poplar. I did this on purpose because, well, one, it looks cool, and two, we just didn't have enough time to do shaker style everything. So after we got all of our cabinet door pieces cut to the right size, Brandon started dadoing out a nice 1/4 inch by 3/4 inch deep groove down the center of all of those pieces. Once he had that done, I gave him a little lesson on making tenons on the table saw. Then he started cutting all of the tenons to the right size and passing them off to me to make sure they fit nicely. Whew, I know this is a lot of information, but we gotta keep going because, well, we didn't have a chance to rest, so why should you? Once all of the frame pieces for our cabinet doors were built, it was time to cut down our panels. For those, we're just using some 1/4 inch MDF, so we cut those all to the right size, smeared some glue on our tenons, and assembled all of our doors. Now, I purposely made these doors oversized. As you can see, our rails and stiles are not all matchy-matchy, and that's okay. We will cut them to the final size after they come out of clamps. Then it was time to start working on drawer faces. These are pretty simple because, like I mentioned before, we're just using some solid pieces of poplar. Brandon's dad came out to watch, which is always nice to woodwork in front of an audience. And after milling up our poplar, we did some test fits to make sure that all of our drawer faces would fit. And then there were 6 of these drawer faces with kind of a curved look on the front. So Brandon and his 2 boys got to work cutting down some more poplar, roughly to size, while I got to work on a 1/4 inch plywood template so we could add that curved shape to some of those drawer faces. I did it pretty technical with a pencil, a ruler, a can of Rubio, and then this other random can I found laying around the shop. Pretty soon we had generally the shape that Brandon was looking for, so I roughly cut it out over on the bandsaw And once that was done, I cleaned it up on his oscillating belt sander. I didn't even stop to see if he liked the shape. I mean, we just didn't have time. So this is what he's getting. Hopefully that's all right. Pretty soon we had a router template made, so using some double-sided tape, we stuck the template to some of that milled up poplar, went back over to the bandsaw to remove most of the material with the bandsaw, then I handed it off to Brandon. He used a pattern routing bit in the router table. That's a bits and bits bit, by the way. And he cut all of the drawer faces to their final shape. While he was doing that, our cabinet doors were dry, so I took them out of clamps and I cut our cabinet doors down to the final size. Jeez, this is a lot of work, and still only on day 2. Whew. By this time, Brandon's entire family seemed to be out in the shop watching. I think somehow word had spread that there was this insane guy from Oregon in Kansas trying to build out a butler's pantry in less than a week. Whew. It was quite the spectacle. But by the end of day 2, we had all of our face frames done, our cabinet doors done, and all of our drawer faces ready for primer. If you're like me, you find yourself running around all day and it's hard to find time to sit down and actually eat a good meal. Well, Factor makes meeting your nutrition goals easier than ever by delivering fresh, never frozen, dietitian-approved meals right to your doorstep. You see, Factor's team of gourmet chefs creates each meal using only ingredients with integrity to help you feel your best all day long. And did I mention they're super quick and easy to make? To put it simply, Factor takes the stress out of meal planning and sets you up for success. Skip the grocery store's prep work and cooking fatigue. Instead, get chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals delivered right to your door with over 35 meals to choose from per week, including options like keto, calorie smart, vegan and veggie, and more. I'm telling you, when things get hectic, Factor is flexible. Change your order up every week with plans from 4 to 18 meals per week, or pause or reschedule your deliveries anytime. I know you've seen us work with HelloFresh in the past, which we love. Well, guess what? Factor is now owned by HelloFresh. The only difference is you don't have to cook these meals. They're all ready to go. And I'm lazy, which means I really like that. So here's what you're going to want to do. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code 50Bourbon to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor box. The code 50Bourbon at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Oh, did I also mention they're really darn delicious? We have to get this whole wall painted today, because we ripped out some shelves and it needs to be painted. But yesterday, what we did get done, if you come out here, is we got all of the face frames built. Brandon is out here getting a little paint booth set up. He's gonna start priming all the face frames. We use lamellos so we can just clip them on there, as you saw. We got all the drawer faces done. So we're gonna get those painted. So at the end of the day today, things are gonna start to look a little different. If you see, Brandon's starting to paint over here. Ooh, nice. So we're gonna get rocking and rolling. It's cold and rainy outside, but it's nice and warm in here. Let's get to work. While Brandon was spraying primer, I was spreading mud. Now, neither one of those things really took that long, so we took an early lunch to one of Kansas's favorite barbecue joints, Joe's Barbecue, I think is what it was called. I don't really remember, but it was delicious. Then it was back to Brandon's shop to sand down everything that had been primed and prep for more paint. We left that evening with Brandon spraying this beautiful blue color. I was a little skeptical on the color at the beginning, but after he started spraying, I gotta say, it was starting to grow on me. Now the funny thing is, when we were flying out here, I thought this entire thing was going to be finish grade with riffs on white oak. I think Brandon did too. It wasn't until we showed up at his house that he told us there was a last minute design change and they wanted everything painted. I told him, that's fine, but I'm not sure we're going to finish in time. He said, I got this. And I have to say, he really did have it. That evening we left with him spraying his final coat of paint, and the weather said tomorrow was going to be a white one. We woke up to about 3 feet of snow. I'm just kidding, it was like 1.5 inches, but 3 feet sounds more dramatic.
I'm feeling a little blue this morning. Because everything's painted blue. It's day 4. Everything's painted for the lower section of cabinets. So this morning it's time to clip everything in place, get some, hopefully, cabinet doors, drawer faces mounted. Still got to build all the drawers, but hey, we're getting there. Countertops are coming in a little bit. Let's get to work.
Now, we showed up at Brandon's house at 8 o'clock on the dot, and the counter people said that they were going to be there at 10 a.m., which gave us 2 hours to get all the face frames installed before they showed up. Now, right about this point, when I started putting Fixo on the cabinet boxes to install the face frames, the countertop people called and said they'd be there in 10 minutes. Of course they are. Like anything on this project would go slow. So we started kicking it into high gear. I squirted out Fixo as fast as I could. We slapped the face frames into place. Luckily, they fit exactly as we planned. And once we had our face frames on the upper cabinet, I thought, hey, they're still not here. We probably have time to do our colored toe kick as well. So I smeared some more Fixo on some pieces of 1/4-inch MDF that Brandon had so kindly painted, and we stuck those on the bottom to cover up that birch toe kick we made. And just like that, our lower cabinets were completely installed, painted, minus the drawer faces and cabinet doors. And literally, as I was putting the last piece of colored toe kick in place, the cabinet guys rolled up and started hauling in slabs of stone. I gotta hand it to this company. I think it's called like Top Rock or Soft Rock, 80s Rock, I forget. But they did an amazing job in a crazy fast turnaround. They really helped us out on this one. While they were installing the countertops, we decided to have them drill a few strategic holes in the top of the counter to give us some anchor points for the upper cabinets. So I marked out where we needed our holes drilled, and then it was back out to the shop to start making drawers. I made a list of all of our drawer measurements, then Brandon and I started ripping down pieces of pre-finished 1/2-inch plywood. By the time we had done that, the countertops were already installed and looked great. So we just busied ourselves constructing drawers. Now, the sides of the drawers were all pre-finished ply, but the bottom was unfinished. So we smeared a nice coat of Rubio on all of our bottom drawer panels. Then Brandon started slapping those drawers together, handing them off to me. I would give them a nice sanding on all the edges and install our Bloom clips for the undermount drawer slides. Speaking of which, after all of our drawer boxes were built, it was into the pantry to install the slides, and then right after, the drawers themselves. This was a pretty simple process because we use the undermount slides, and if you've watched any of my videos, well, you know they're the best, and installation is a breeze. We did have to add one brace piece in the center of this cabinet right here so we could mount slides in the middle there, and just like that, all of our drawer boxes were in, and all we had to do was slap on some drawer faces. This gives you a little bit better idea of what those drawer faces that we made earlier are going to look like. It's a pantry, so they kind of wanted this open drawer look so you can see what kind of food and snacks you have available. I dig it. I think they look pretty darn cool. And because they're open, they're really easy to install because you can actually get clamps on the drawer faces, which is not the case for all of the upper drawers. Those are traditional insets, so I just use some double stick tape, which is kind of my preferred method. You just stick them on there, open the drawer, add some clamps so the drawer face doesn't move around, and throw in some screws. Bada bing, installed. I did the first bank of drawers, kind of showed Brandon how I did it, and then I set him loose on the second bank, and he did a fantastic job. Then it was on to installing all of our lower cabinet doors. And just like that, in 4 short days, the entire lower section of cabinets was completely done, and that was including a stone countertop. Day 5 kind of felt like Groundhog Day, because in many ways we were right back to the beginning of this project, and that was building cabinets. Now you might be wondering why we didn't build all of the cabinets to start with, so we only had to paint everything one time. Well, the fact of the matter is I had zero confidence that we were actually going to complete this entire project. So I wanted to focus on those lower cabinets in case we didn't have time to do the upper ones. At least we would leave them with something that was finished. But I just didn't realize how much of a beast Brandon actually is and how quick he was going to work. So here we are on day 5 and we're starting to work on those upper cabinets. Now the upper cabinet design is much simpler. There's one cabinet that's hung on the wall with counter space underneath it, and then one small cabinet that is floor to ceiling. Or I guess counter to ceiling, because the floor is already covered. While me and Brandon were building more cabinet boxes, Craig started prepping the space for painting that back wall. Now you can do upper hanging cabinets in a couple different ways. You can do a French cleat to hang them, you can do a nailer strip to hang them, you can do just a really thick back panel and screw right through that. We opted for a couple nailer strips on the inside of the cabinet underneath the top and the middle shelf. Once we had that box all constructed, there was nothing else to do except haul it into the pantry and slap it up on the wall. So very carefully, we moved it into position. We made these little blocks to set it on top of to kind of hold it at the right height once we got it in there. So we pushed it against the back wall, set it on those temporary little blocks, and it was installed. No, I'm just joking. It's not installed. It's just sitting there. To install it, we got a stud finder and a laser, made sure we had that laser right on the center of our studs, and we screwed in a total of 6 3-inch long screws directly into the studs. So I really don't think this cabinet box is going anywhere. With that one installed, it was on to box number 2. This one is pretty simple. It looks something like this, and this one's actually going to be open on the bottom, so when you open the cabinet doors, you'll see that beautiful countertop. Whilst we were constructing the final cabinet box, Craig was inside putting a nice coat of beautiful white paint on that back wall, which, between you and me, was not the original color choice. The original color choice was in this can right here. When I saw that, I broke my cardinal rule of not giving design input to patrons. I just couldn't bring myself to let him put that color on the wall against those blue cabinets. I didn't even tell him we were switching the color. I just hid it in Brandon's cabinet and told him we couldn't find it. Guess we have to use white. Then, once again, it was on to face frames. We did this exactly the same way as we did the other cabinets. We cut all of our individual pieces, clipped them onto the boxes as we went. Now, this is the only cabinet box that you're actually going to see the sides on because it's going to sit in the middle of our counter. So we had to build this entire box out in Brandon's shop so we could paint the entire things, face frame and sides of the cabinet. So once we had the face frame built, we clipped it in place with those lamellos and a little Thixo, which is thickened epoxy from Total Boat. If you don't know what that is, I've been talking about it and I should probably have mentioned the actual product. I'll put a link in the description. Once we had that face frame done, we built the other face frame for the hanging cabinet, and this one's also a little strange because we have to put this huge panel on the right side of it so that we have a space to hang our floating shelves that Brandon thinks we're somehow going to have time to make in this entire project. So that face frame looked something like this. We set that aside, and then, oh yeah, we have to build like 8 more cabinet doors for all of these cabinet boxes we just made. Pretty soon we had all of our cabinet doors done, and once again it was time to prime everything to get it ready for more coats of paint. What day is it again? It was the morning of day 6 and our last full day at Brandon's house. So it was go time. Now I gotta be honest, I'm not quite sure when it happened because I didn't see it, but at some point Brandon cut down all the pieces we needed for our floating shelves. They were comprised of rift sawn white oak plywood and solid rift sawn oak. So Craig and I sanded everything and smeared some Rubio on it. While we were doing that, Brandon was in the garage spraying paint. And since we couldn't really do anything until the paint dried, we thought we might as well go out to Topgolf and hit some golf balls and have a good time. So that's exactly what we did. But just so you don't think that we just played that entire day, after Topgolf, we went to this local store called Locks and Poles and helped Brandon pick out all the hardware for his cabinet doors and drawers. After multiple calls to his wife, we had everything we needed. It was the morning of day 7 at 8 a.m. Now, Craig and I had a flight out of Kansas City at 3 o'clock, which meant that we could leave Brandon's house no later than 12:30 p.m. if we wanted any chance of catching our flight home. So that's all the time we had to finish this entire space. Luckily, Brandon had gotten everything painted, so it was just down to getting it all installed. We started squirting Fixo on all of our cabinet boxes, brought in those face frames, and just crossed our fingers that they would fit. A couple clippity claps later, and our first face frame was installed. Then it was time for our larger cabinet unit. This was nicely painted as well, so we wanted to be very careful not to scrape it on any door jambs as we carried it through the house and into the pantry. Now, if you remember, we had them drill holes in the countertop so that we could anchor this cabinet to the countertop and it wouldn't be flopping around. So I was really curious to see if we drilled the holes in the right places. So we kind of roughly put the cabinet where it should go, and my heart was very relieved to see that we nailed the positioning on those holes. So we scooted the cabinet out of the way, we found the studs in that back wall, we scooted the cabinet back, and then we removed some drawers so that we could access those holes under the countertop. We anchored the cabinet to the countertop via the holes under the countertop. Whew. And then we hooked the entire cabinet to studs in the back wall using a laser. Well, actually we used some screws and an impact driver. The laser wouldn't have done much good to hook the cabinet into that back wall. Anyways, once our upper cabinet boxes were installed, it was time to start working on those floating shelves. At this point it was like 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning. So I started marking out on all the walls where our shelves needed to land. Now we're going to do kind of a traditional box shelf, which means there's going to be braces on 3 sides, a top and a bottom, and then a front face piece. So step 1 is get all of your braces in the correct location. I started first by laying out all of the back braces to set the heights of our shelves. I just used some scrap pieces of 3/4 inch ply. I screwed them into studs along the back wall and then right into the cabinets on either side. Then I started cutting down our rift sawn plywood panels for all of the top pieces. Once I got those to fit right, I cut rift sawn plywood panels for all the bottom pieces. Then I took all of our pieces out to the shop and marked where I wanted Brandon to drill out for lamello clips. Handed all the pieces off to him, and he used the lamello to mortise out all the appropriate holes. Then it was back into the pantry where I added some Fixo to the outside edge of all of our bottom panels. I stuck those in place and I just held them secure until the Fixo dried with a 16 gauge brad nailer. Sure, there would be other ways to do this, but we just don't have time. It's like 10:30 right now and we gotta leave in 2 hours. Then to install the upper panels, I used these pinhead screws because Brandon wanted to maybe run some lights through the bottom of the shelves, and he liked the idea of being able to take off that top panel if he ever wanted to. With all of our upper and lower panels cut to the right size and installed, it was time to start adding our face pieces. I'd give the measurements to Brandon, he'd run out and cut me a piece of pre-finished rift sawn oak. I'd hold it up to the shelf, I'd mark where we already put lamello clips on the top and the bottom, then I'd pull the piece back off, hand it to Brandon, he'd run out to the shop, he'd add all the clips with the lamello to the back side of that face piece, bring it back into me, and I'd clip it in place. I mean, really, it couldn't be simpler. Unless, of course, we had like 4 hours to do this instead of 45 minutes. Now, you might think I'm exaggerating things for the sake of a YouTube video, but I promise I am not. At this point in the project, we had less than an hour before we had to get in the car and head to the airport, so I was clipping and clapping as fast as I possibly could because we still had to install cabinet doors and hardware. Pretty soon, we had all of the floating shelves done. Don't ask me how. I still don't know how those managed to get complete. With 20 minutes left, we started installing all the cabinet doors. Might I add that we never really test fit any of these, so I was just praying that all of our measurements were correct. I don't know if it was luck or the fact that Kansas really is super flat, but all of our cabinet doors seem to fit pretty darn good. With everything installed, the last thing left to do was install the hardware. At this point, we had 10 minutes before we had to be in the car. So Brandon was drilling and screwing for drawer pulls. I was adding the drawer pulls to the drawers. His son Landon was screwing on the knobs. And somehow, we finished.
Whew. Now, we've had some doozies with this patron build thing before, but this one was a real doozy because we have to get on a plane in about an hour. We are down to the wire, but we got it completely done. The lowers, the countertop got installed, drawers, cabinet doors, uppers, shelves, everything in a week, which is nuts. I mean, these things keep getting bigger and bigger. So until next time. I know that outro was cut a little bit short, but we literally turned the camera off, ran to the car, scooted to the airport, got on a plane, and flew back here. I mean, we had zero time. But the fact that we got all that done in 7 days was pretty darn good. Thanks to Brandon and his family for being wonderful hosts and for staying up till 4 a.m. in the morning to get all the painting done. If you're not signed up for Patreon, you should be, because maybe we'll come out to your place next. There's a link down in the video description, right down there. You gotta be a patron to win, so get to it.